I always say empathy is the first and most important quality you can have as a marketer, because if you have empathy, you're putting yourself in the position of the searcher or your potential customer. And so now you can see what they want, where they're at in their life that led them to this place where now they're looking at you as a possible solution for their problem.
Welcome to the Pet Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Skarlet Rockwood. As a content marketer for pet professionals, I love talking with other marketers and business owners in the pet industry and sharing their marketing advice with you. So join me for the latest episode and learn how to grow your audience, increase your revenue, and impact the lives of pets and their people. Pamela Keniston has had roots in the pet industry for more than 10 years. She's helped ideate and execute marketing campaigns for industry giants such as Zoetis Pet Care and Ceva Animal Health, as well as smaller businesses and startups. Using her passion for writing, her thirst for data, and her strategic expertise, she crafts award-winning content campaigns that deliver results. Pamela lives in South Carolina with her husband and her dog Zuzu. Hey, Pamela, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Skarlet, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So let's just dive right on in. Pam, can you share a little bit about your journey in the pet industry and how you got started with Big Paws Marketing?
Absolutely. So I started in marketing about 11 years ago now in 2013. So I was actually a little bit late to the game. I had always had my hand in different marketing arenas, but never specifically with a specific focus. So I started out as a blogger, actually. And in 2013, I was getting paid $22 to write 500-word articles, and they weren't that great, to be honest. But I started evolving as a writer, and I learned more and more about SEO, and something that I absolutely came to love. And so fast forward years later, I started my own agency. In 2015, we kind of morphed into just serving the pet industry. We still had a couple clients here and there, but pet industry was really where we were niched down to. And so me and my small team now, that's exclusively what we do, is we serve the pet industry with digital marketing and PR.
That's really awesome. So that's kind of the same journey I had. Most people that I talk to in the pet industry who serves pet businesses as a service provider, they were pet businesses, and then they shifted from being a pet sitter to a bookkeeper or something along those lines.
Right.
But I was the same as you. I started out as a social media marketer for any small business, and then niched down when I realized, yeah, pet industry is just the place to be. It's where I want to be, and it's how I can actually care about what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
And not, yacht engines and landscaping and things I don't care about.
Exactly. Who doesn't love to be in the pet world?
Yeah, exactly. So why is blogging a critical component for marketing for pet businesses?
Yeah, that's a great question. And going back to when I first started out, the sort of blanket answer I was given is it helps to drive traffic to the website. So that's sort of like the standard answer that we hear, but how does it do that? And, why is that really important? So blogging is basically another way to do that, just gain traffic, but it's really more than that too. So we use blogging as internal signals for search engines. So let's say you're an e-com business, you're selling pet supplements, and you have this great product that is your flagship product. We can support that with blogging content. So what problem does that solve? How can we help pet parents solve that problem? And so we use very specific keyword research to determine how we're going to develop those blog posts. And so internally in two search engines, those pages are really important signals where we link back to those product pages, right? So that's one reason. Another reason is that it can help establish your brand as a subject matter expert. Obviously, if you're in especially something related to healthcare, and maybe you have a veterinary professional on your team that can review the article, or even write the article, that's going to lend more credibility to your brand. And so, of course, we want to do that. And then bringing us back to traffic, it really does drive traffic to the site. And we can get into the pros and cons and some of the bad practices that I've seen that are just related to driving traffic. But that's kind of the short answer of why we want to create and maintain a blog. And frankly, it gives you great fodder for all of your other marketing initiatives too, right? Like you can repurpose it on social and an email. And so you're constantly giving that valuable information to your customer or potential customer base, right? And so instead of just asking all the time saying, hey, can we get a sale? Can we get a sale? Can we get a sale? We're saying, here's something that we think is going to be really super valuable to you. We want to share this knowledge with you.
Yeah, absolutely. That is really great that you went into more than just bringing traffic in, because that is
It's a lot more than that.
yeah, it is. It's so much more than that. So, in your opinion, how has content marketing and particularly blogging evolved in the pet industry since you niched down in 2015?
Yeah, it definitely has. And blogging in general, no matter what niche you're in, has changed. As we know, algorithms get updated all the time. The helpful content update kind of decimated a lot of people's traffic back in the fall, and we're still seeing the results of that. So we see those algorithm updates help to evolve our content, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But initially, when I started blogging, it was a lot about volume and length, right? So it started out as, okay, we need to have 800 words is a minimum for our blog article. And then it went to like 1,300 and then 2,300 and then 3,000. So weird little things like that have changed where people are starting to get focused on actual just word count and just stuffing as much content into a blog post as possible. Whereas now, the positive thing that has come out of that helpful content update is really focusing on just being helpful. So, if we were going at that rate before, we would be writing novels for things that we could answer in like a couple of paragraphs. That just doesn't make any sense. So, blog content should really be focused on providing value for the reader, what's going to help them, what's their intent to search. And keyword tools have really evolved along with that as well. I remember when I first started blogging, I was working for a small agency and there was no keyword research done. Even back then, when it was fairly common to do so, not everybody did that. It was just like, well, let's get together and think about some ideas to write about what we think people might want to see. But really, that sort of non-strategy, it has completely gone away for anybody that's effectively blogging. So it's always going to be backed now with data. We know not only from our keyword research that this is a topic that's going to be of interest, it's actually going to be searched for by our audience, but also, just being in the pet industry, you start to learn how things evolve. And I'll give you an example. We had a client that had a supplement that had green-lipped mussels in it. And if you do keyword research for that, there's almost no volume for that keyword, the keyword green-lipped mussel for dogs. But knowing that, this is an up and coming search term that pet parents are starting to get interested in, we were able to get in on the ground floor. So it's sort of this marrying of data and creativity and industry knowledge that has evolved through the years to really create, when it's applied correctly, to create content that's valuable.
That's incredible. So I have a question from that. So since we're moving to it mattering more about how helpful it is versus how long it is, would you say that has reiterated and kind of backed down on how long the minimum length of a blog post is, or is there just no minimum length anymore, in your opinion?
I don't think there's a minimum length. Some people might disagree with me, but I've seen short 500-600 word articles rank at number one, and others that are 3,000 words barely rank at all. So it really goes back to what is helpful for the reader. And if you're exploring a topic that demands 3,000 words, absolutely go for it. But if you're writing an article about can dogs eat blueberries, you probably don't need 3,000 words to do that.
Right. Yeah. You can probably barely get, 500 out of yes.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
So, in that same sense, what is your opinion of the strategy of using like ultimate guides or pillar pages or hub pages, there's a lot of different terms for them, as like the longer content that goes over like the whole high level of a topic, and then having smaller pieces that branch off of that as shorter
Yeah.
articles?
I'm a huge fan of that. And in my mind, it's like kind of a file cabinet system, right? So kind of going back old school, like you have your whole cabinet and then you'll have separate drawers, and then within them you have folders, and then you may have subfolders. So that's kind of how I think of our website structure. So those pillar pages or those blog posts, they can be very comprehensive. Maybe they are 3,000-4,000 words even. And then we're going to break out from those subtopics that we can then expand upon in separate articles. And we always create those pillar articles first because those older URLs are going to be prioritized by search engines first. So we want those to have a nice tight ranking. We want them to rank high, and of course, always linking back to our product pages. So we're getting that link juice. And so that's how we usually like to structure things.
Yeah, that is how I recommend it as well when I do a marketing action plan. One of the things I always tell them is I teach them like what that concept is in blogging if they don't know it already, and I give them like, here's 3 ideas for your first, pillar page for your website, because I really, really think that if they're going to blog, that is the way to go about it for sure.
Yeah.
So what is kind of your system for identifying and understanding who the target is for a specific pet business's blog, so that you know like which keywords matter?
Yeah, that goes back to our data analytics too. So one of the things that we usually do when we onboard a brand is we start by creating a brand kit if they don't already have one. And that involves creating buyer personas. How do we know who our buyer persona is? We have to dive into the data. So if your customer has Amazon data, you're going to get some great demographic information there. Google Analytics, it's a little bit trickier to get that nowadays. And then social, Instagram, you can find that pretty easily too. Typically, we find in the pet industry, we're speaking to women. I would say 95% of the time, that is the majority of our audience is women. And more often than not, like the 45, like 35 plus, but 45 plus tend to be the higher spenders a lot of times. So when we're creating those buyer personas, now we know exactly who we're talking to. We can identify with them. We create a brand voice so that we're speaking in a way that is actually going to motivate them to do what we want them to do with the information that they get in the post.
Yeah, I love that. That's another thing that's a big part of the marketing action plan, is like the customer persona is such a big deal. And
Yes.
the client interviews and everything are built to make sure that we get that buyer persona right, because that drives everything in marketing. If you're not talking to the right person, what's the point?
Exactly. I agree 100%.
So when we think about coming up with engaging and relevant blog topics for each pet businesses, how do you go about doing that?
That can be tricky. And honestly, sometimes we think of blogging as like, well, you just sit down and you write something, but the actual writing of the blog post that's not the majority of the time suck, really. It's the strategy, like you were just saying. How do you plan it? Where do you start? So what we do is we use our keyword research tools like SEMrush. We analyze their competitors. We say, okay, who are they competing with, and what keywords are their competition already ranking for? Are there any gaps? Maybe they can rank for keywords that their competition hasn't tapped into. So we'll start with things like that, and then also just understanding the objective of the customer. What are they trying to do? They have a flagship product where we want to drive 75% of sales to this product, so that's going to inform the related content in the blog. And then of course just the keyword volume, and the difficulty. We want to have a nice high volume for keyword research and a nice low search difficulty. And if you're a startup, like what does that mean? Probably less than 30. So we want to start really nice and slow and low. If you've been around for a while, you know, you've got a lot of backlinks to your website, you've got some age on it, then your search difficulty might go up to, say, 50. But if you're, you know, an enterprise brand, you've got the money to spend on, you know, advertisements and, you know, going after certain keywords, then, you know, really we can go sky's the limit and we can market that piece of content really well. And then, you know, like we were talking about before with the greenlit muscles, it's just industry knowledge sometimes. You know what's going on in the industry, you know what's up and coming, what's going on in the climate, you may know of. For instance, we'll take Zoetis. They just launched a product last year called Solensia. So they're investing a lot of marketing dollars into helping pet parents understand feline arthritis. So now we can, knowing that, we can piggyback off of that if we have another brand that has maybe a supporting product where we're capitalizing on that education that they're already doing in the industry.
Yeah, that's a really good point of looking at what's going on in the industry that can be supportive to what you want to teach people. Is there someone else who you can also use to kind of link to their things in your blogs as well? Because I know it's really valuable to link to other pages on your own site, but there's also a value to linking to other authoritative websites as well, right?
Yes, as long as they're not competing. I always give that caveat to customers. You know, if you, let's say you're a blogger, you don't want to link out to another blogger per se, unless you're, you know, have some intrinsic value, but just avoid the competition. But anything that's authoritative, especially like a .edu site or maybe it's a veterinary site, those are perfectly fine to link out to.
Or maybe a complementary business where what
Yes.
they offer and what you offer would appeal to the same person, but don't necessarily compete directly.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
So can you share some tips on someone who's kind of starting out new at this, crafting compelling blog posts and maybe headlines that capture attention that will actually get that click when people see it on Google?
My number one tip is don't rely on ChatGPT to craft your headlines. I've seen this so many times, especially with freelancers and newer agencies. And after you've been around for a while, you can spot those headlines so far away, and they're not very, very humanized. So when we're talking about crafting headlines specifically, my process goes a little bit like this. When we're doing keyword research, we have our head keyword, and that's always going to be in our headline. Preferably it's towards the beginning, but if you have to choose creating a humanized title or putting it towards the beginning and making it less humanized, always go with the humanized title, even if it means you have to tweak your keyword just a little bit. So now you've got your headline, and then you're going to look for supporting keywords, and those are going to be your subheads. So now you basically have an outline for your whole post, and then you just have to fill in the copy in between. So that might look like 10 signs that your dog is developing canine osteoarthritis. And, you know, under that, we might have subheadings like, of course, we're going to go into the 10 signs, but it might be when to see your vet, or it might be mobility aids for dogs with arthritis, things like that. So those are going to all become our subheadings. And then we can also fill in any questions. We can use those from, like, people also ask from Google. We can use those as FAQs at the bottom as well. Google recently said that they're devaluing FAQs, but you know, just from a user perspective, I think they're still valuable. So even if they're saying from a technical standpoint, FAQs don't matter, in the end, they really still do, because they're helpful to the reader, and that in turn is going to help boost your post.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that FAQ is something that until now has really helped with, like, being that person, like, where Google will answer the question before you even click on it. And that's how you get into that spot, right?
Right, exactly. Yep.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about SEO and things like that. How important is SEO for a pet business blog? I think we already know the answer to that one. But what are some of the most important, like basic key strategies for optimizing a blog post?
Don't ignore the little things because they all add up to big things. So those might include, like we just talked about, using your head keyword in your title. You're also going to use it in your meta description, and that can be tricky to write a really great, well-crafted meta description. This is the little blurb that appears in search results below the article. And if you write a crappy one, Google's going to just choose its own from your article, and they're going to reformulate it. And sometimes they'll do that anyway, just based on the particular search keyword that the user is using. But if you can get ahead of the game, make sure that your keyword, your head keyword is in your meta description, make it pithy, make it compelling. That's going to be important. Remember to use alt text in all of your images. This is the little blurb of text that describes what the image is about, and it's primarily for accessibility. So imagine somebody that's visually impaired. Would your alt text describe to them what the image is about? And if you can include your keyword there, that's great. Don't force it though. That's another little thing. Craft a really great URL. So let's say you're writing a post about, maybe your title is the 10 best dog beds from the perspective of a dog mom or something like that. You're not going to use it, your WordPress or whatever you're using is going to use those exact words in your URL by default. You want to make sure to change that so that it's truncated, so that it's a little bit more readable. So your URL might become best dog beds, especially if that's your specific keyword, best dog beds. So little things like that, and making sure too that you're using native images, not a lot of stock imagery, especially if you're selling your specific product, or if you're selling affiliate products or something like that, make sure that they're native. And all of those little things really add up to these bigger signals. And, if you start to ignore them, you'll see that affected in your traffic overall.
So when you're talking about the URL title, do you recommend having it without any separation, like to where it would read like it's all one word? Or do you recommend where some people will like hyphenate between words? Which one's better for SEO?
Yeah, hyphenated. So best dog beds would be best -dog -beds. Yeah.
And that helps Google know where the words begin and end?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, awesome. You've used a couple of terms so far that I'm not sure all of our readers will understand in context. So when you say humanizing a headline, what does that mean specifically?
Well, excuse me, we'll see this a lot in ChatGPT titles as well. Like they'll try to prioritize these keyword at the beginning of the title to the detriment of the rest of the title. So that might look like 10 best dog beds, why you should choose them. So that doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, does it? So we want to humanize our titles so that they're easy for humans to read. Because ultimately, if we're creating content that's really just for search engines, we lose in the end. It's really a tricky balance because you do want to appease the search engines, but appeasing the search engines also means writing for a human first audience. So as opposed to, that horrible title we just talked about, it might look like the 10 best dog beds that your dog can't live without this year, or something along those lines. That's a little bit more heartfelt. It speaks to why the pet parent is, searching for that term. And that's always my primary concern is when I'm writing. I always say empathy is the first and most important quality you can have as a marketer, because if you have empathy, you're putting yourself in the position of the searcher or your potential customer. And so now you can see what they want, where they're at in their life that led them to this place where now they're looking at you as a possible solution for their problem.
I think that is the best explanation that we could have asked for. That's so much more than just make it readable. Thank you. And then the other thing you mentioned was you want to use native images rather than stock images. So when you say that, you mean like images that you've taken of your brand?
Yes, exactly. So anytime you can not use stock images, that's great because that distinguishes you as having unique content. And sometimes it's just unavoidable. We're going to use stock imagery. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, but anywhere possible, we want to use our own native imagery. And I will provide that with a caveat that we want to make sure that that is really good, clean, crisp imagery with good lighting. If photography is not your thing, hire somebody to do it or just use the stock imagery. It's better than having imagery that's, poor quality or fuzzy or just hard to read or hard to see.
Right, absolutely. So we've talked about all the things we can do to optimize for a specific end goal. How do we measure that? What metrics or KPIs do you suggest a pet business focuses on to actually measure the success of their blogging project?
I use two tools primarily. One is Google Analytics and the other is Google Search Console. So Google Analytics is going to tell us things like how long people are spending on the page or how quickly they're bouncing off. And while those things aren't like specifically going to make a huge impact on whether or not Google shows your article to somebody, they do have some effect. Especially when we think about time on page, like, are people actually taking the time to read through your content, or are they just browsing it, looking for the answer, and then bouncing off? And if that's the case, they're probably never getting to the bottom of your article where you're talking about how your product helps them to solve a problem. So that can help us, or that can help to inform where we want to go with our content, how we want to improve it. The other tool is Google Search Console. So Google Search Console is going to tell us how the article appears in search results. It will provide things like how many impressions it got, so how many eyes got on it. So if I search for dog beds and then I come across your article in my search, then that counts as an impression. If I see it twice, then that's 2 impressions. It's also going to measure where you're at in your ranking. So if you're trying to rank for the keyword dog beds, are you at number 20? Are you at number 5 in that search results page? And this is getting trickier and trickier because, as we all know, those search results pages are just so crowded now. And even from a non-marketer, just user perspective, we're hearing this on other threads like in Reddit and just in conversation, how it's very frustrating for people now to kind of weed through the mess. Supposedly that's something that Google is working on. We'll see how that pans out. But if you were at position number 20, 2 years ago, that means something different than it does today, because up above you, there's also going to be shopping results. There's going to be related questions results. And so 20 might have been, maybe page 3 a couple of years ago, and now you might be at like page 5. So things have changed a little bit in that domain. Google Search Console is also going to let us measure your click-through rate. So when somebody sees and stumbles upon your listing of your article, are they actually clicking through to it? And that's a super helpful metric because that's something we can do something about. And that goes back to our meta description. Is it enticing? And our title too, is our title enticing people to actually click through and get the information in the article?
Mm-hmm. So how important is it still to be page 1? Like, is the difference between page 1 and page 2 drastically different between page 2 and page 3, or page 2 and page 5? Or is it just the closer the better?
The closer the better. It's just becoming a little bit more challenging to be towards the top of the actual results. So the listing, when you see that in Google Search Console, it still means the same thing. If you're position number 5 or position number 10 or whatever in organic search results, you're position number 10. The problem is they're also filling in all of these other elements above those organic search results. So when it comes to how you look on the page, you're going to be down further than you were a few years ago.
Yeah. So once you've got a blog post created and you've got it fully optimized, how would you recommend promoting it? What are the steps that you guys take to make sure that, people see it beyond
Yeah.
this?
Everywhere you can. And you can immediately submit your URL to Google Search Console to start indexing. Typically, they'll do that anyway, but some SEOs are reporting that Google is just skipping that step for one reason or another, especially if the brand that you're working with, maybe they have had some less than valuable content in the past. Google may have decided, well, we're not going to index everything. So just as a precautionary step, I always just submit the URL to get it indexed, and hopefully you start ranking fairly soon, start seeing some kind of traffic come in. So that's step one. And then obviously you want to promote on all of your channels, like your social media. Sometimes we turn these into little slides, like we'll turn a blog post into sort of a little slider that's informational that basically reiterates those topics that are in the blog post. And then you can obviously reiterate that in the caption as well. Also in your email, you want to make sure that you're promoting it there. Again, we're giving people something, giving your readers something to look forward to instead of just ask. We're saying, here's some great info, which of course leads to your website. And secondly, if you've interviewed any experts, let's say you interviewed a veterinarian and you got a great quote, and maybe this veterinarian has a nice social following, make sure to send that to them so that they can share it on their own social channels and request that they do so. And lastly, if you have any metrics that you've included that you have created, perhaps you did a small scale study and you found that 47% of dogs in Georgia are fearful of fireworks. So that's a statistic that you can include and send to the media if it's of interest, if it's impactful enough. So just a little bit of outreach, and there's some great like kind of brief PR courses out there, sometimes for free, that you can take to learn how to do that sort of pitching to the media.
Yeah, I love that you've included like using other people's channels, like telling people that you've interviewed to share it on their pages, talking to, getting it out as a press release or talking to journalists, because a lot of people think about their own social media channels and their own email list, but they don't go that extra step of who else might be really interested in sharing this content that isn't necessarily my own channels.
Exactly. And I will say, add a bit of caution too, when you're doing any kind of paid promotion. I found some really great results using Google Ads. If that's a channel that you want to explore, I would recommend that. But when it comes to Facebook ads for content, I haven't found that they've always been that great in terms of results, because one, Facebook doesn't want people to leave the platform. They want to keep people on the platform. And two, people want to stay on the platform. They may be a little bit more hesitant to link out to another external site, and they're really not there to read more long form content. So I would say keep, those types of content, keep it to just sharing it on your Facebook page instead of directing them with paid advertisement to that particular blog post.
Yeah, it can be really difficult when you're promoting and it's just trying to get traffic to a blog post with Facebook ads. You really have to have a really clear goal where, like, if you're promoting them to an opt-in to get them on your email list and then promote a product, like that monetization funnel is really important.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the one thing I will say, what works on me, Facebook ads that lead to an article, is the ones that are really fun, bite-sized content that is not like, I have to read this whole book to get this one point. It's like, the 30 cutest dogs on Instagram. Like, those are the types of things that work for Facebook ads, because then they're still getting bite-sized content. They can stop in the middle and not have missed the point. But even that can be tricky. But I know there's a lot of blogs who that's like their whole system and their whole agenda is like they do these really short, fun, like the ones that get me are like, I can't believe that, my sister said this, like it's that clickbaity title. I'm like, dang it, you're gonna get me.
Did it again.
And of course, the actual thing they use as the image is never in the article.
Right,
the thing. I would
exactly.
never do that. If you're going to use
Don't do
one of
that.
those like cliffhanger titles, please put it somewhere in the article.
Exactly. Yeah, I 100% agree. There are certain types of content, but when we're talking like long form content that's maybe informational, doesn't always perform that well. And even if you do try it, I would always recommend go to your Google Analytics. Don't rely on your Facebook Analytics because you may see a ton of clicks, but they may not stay on that page long enough to actually register as a visit. So when you're linking out to content, like Facebook might say, oh, you've got a great click-through rate and you've had, thousands of clicks to this article, and you may go to Google Analytics and it may say you've had 5. And that's because they're just bouncing away. So if you do try it, just make sure that you're using the right set of analytics to measure your success.
Yeah, and I will say one thing that can be confusing to some people about the Meta Ads analytics is that the clicks on an ad do not equal the same as the clicks to your link. Because if somebody
Exactly.
likes, if somebody shares, if somebody clicks to leave a comment, if somebody clicks see more on your caption, all of those are clicks. So they do have an analytic for the number of clicks and the number of click through to your link. And those are actually different metrics. And a lot of people don't realize that.
That's a really good point. Yep, I agree.
So what are some of the common challenges and pitfalls that you see pet businesses facing with their blogs? And what would you say is the best ways to avoid them?
Common pitfalls that I see are just blogging to blog. Again, going back to that sort of old adage, like, oh, we get traffic. And in fact, I share this example in my speech at the Pet Summit next week, where we have one article I will just say it's a very popular supplement brand that does in-house, they have an in-house marketing team. And their article is the 7 most scary dogs that are actually nice, or something along those lines. They're ranking really well for the keyword scary dogs, but nowhere in the article are they actually relating that to their product. So there's a lot of missed opportunity there. And putting yourself in the position of the pet parent can help prevent that, because why are they searching for that term? Maybe chances are they're looking to adopt a shelter dog and they're wondering, for instance, are pit bulls actually scary or are they nice? And so, there's opportunity to talk about the reputation that these dogs have, as well as why are they that way? Oftentimes it's because of anxiety, right? And they've been in these shelters or they've been in bad homes previously. So how can your supplement brand help with anxiety? If you have an anxiety product, you can talk about those types of ingredients that can calm dogs and help with the transition to a new home. But nowhere in that article did they relate it to their actual product or their overall business objective. At the end, they had several calls to action, like contact us, follow us on social, read this other article. There's too many things to do. So be really clear about what you want your audience to do with the information that you've given them, and always have a purpose with every piece of content that you create. Write it for a human that you have in mind, where you're thinking, this is why they need this article. They're searching, they have this problem. I'm going to help them with it, and I'm going to write this article for them, and I'm going to tell them what they need to do with this information because I can help solve their problem. So don't just create blog posts just to get so-called traffic, because even though in a roundabout way that can help you, because Google looks at your site overall, not just your specific pages, they're going to look at your site overall of how popular is the site? Are we getting a lot of traffic to various pages? So it can help in a roundabout way, but we can do so much more than just drive random traffic. We can be very intentional with the content that we're creating and show how our brand is a subject matter expert and how we can help somebody solve a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the same problem with people on social media, where a lot of people are like, I just want to put out something that's going to go viral and I don't care what it's about. And I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
That's great. But talking about, how to cook chicken tzatziki or whatever is not necessarily gonna help you get pet sitting clients unless
Right.
you're cooking it for the dog.
Right.
Tell me how this relates to what you're
Right.
talking about. And that's because, all these metrics, they tell us a story of what eventually leads to our end goal of conversion, right? And to brand awareness. But if they're not leading to that end goal or talking to the right person, then it's just a vanity metric.
Exactly. Exactly. We want traffic that actually converts. That's the goal.
Yeah.
Remember why
absolutely.
you're in business. You're in business to help people and get customers. So everything that you do should be in service of that goal.
Absolutely. So if a lot of our listeners are small pet businesses, they're startups, they have really limited resources. What would you recommend? How can they make the most out of their efforts with having a blog?
Do it consistently. That would be my number one piece of advice. Invest in some help if you can, but even if you're doing it yourself, just do it consistently and do it well. And again, just be thinking about how it's going to help drive your overall goals for your business. Plan on, if you're going to write a really great piece of content, plan on 5 to 6 hours. I know that sounds like a long time, but remember, this is basically you're creating a web page. And we know how long it takes to create websites. You don't just throw them up there and have all the content done and pretty in an afternoon. It takes a long time. So this is another page to your website. So invest in the time to make it matter.
And I would say also I think you'd probably agree that if you can put out one blog post a month that you can take the time to properly research and optimize, that's going to be better than 4 that you haven't been able to do any SEO on.
Yeah, exactly. Which brings us back to, don't just create content just for the sake of creating content. Have a goal, have an objective, and make it matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So based on your experiences, let's talk about what's coming up in the future. Do you have any trends or emerging things that you see happening in blogging that pet businesses can take advantage of?
Blogging sort of took a back seat for a little bit, and it's coming back around. Readers are coming on stronger. They're looking for content to consume. So I don't think it's going anywhere. The obvious trend is, of course, with AI. People are wondering, is AI going to take over the world? So I'll give you this example. A fellow agency owner, not in the pet industry, he decided to go all in on an AI agency, and he hired all these developers. They're doing actually some pretty cool things with AI, but one of the tools that they developed was where you put in a URL and then it will spit out all of these tags related to that URL. So, for the pet industry, it might be 100 tags related to cat litter or whatever the topic is, and then you can edit them as you go, and it will just spit out as many blog posts as you want. It could do 100 in a month if you want to, and that could be really tempting to get into doing something like that, like taking a shortcut. So I thought, just as an experiment, I'm like, I'm going to try this and see what it does. So I put in a client's URL, it spit out all the tags. And the first article that it spit out was Dog and Cat Litter Box Training 101. And then it had a nice image of a weightlifter on the cover. And then proceeded to talk about how, it impeded the bond of your dog and or cat. It just very robotic. And so, there's some great ways to use AI, but not using it like that is going to be, we don't want to do that. So using it maybe more for just content ideas or to help you refine your content. I know sometimes I'm thinking of like, okay, how can I create this title? Like the word is just, it's on the tip of my tongue and I can't think of what it is. And so ChatGPT or other AI tools can help you with things like that. So I think that's the future, kind of where we're going with blogging, is that it's not going anywhere. And the fact is that as humans, we always want to hear stories. Like when my dog Zuzu was a puppy, she was diagnosed with luxated patellas. And, I hit the internet right away looking for not just facts about, okay, how successful is the surgery and what do they do, but I wanted to hear real life pet parent stories of successful outcomes. and be able to relate that to my own life. And AI is never going to be able to do that for us in a meaningful way. So we're always going to need human writers. I think it will just evolve a little bit more where we're refining our content with using AI tools.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely is a tool. It is not a replacement, right?
Yes.
So it's something where like I use it as well for ideas for a first draft, so to speak, of content a lot of times, but I always have to read and edit it and make sure that it is in line with what we're trying to say.
Right.
And then, I think that the big temptation, especially these big agencies who want to pay, overseas writers $10 per 1,000 words to pump out a blog post a day to build this information website so they can run ads to
Right.
it. They're the ones
Right.
who are going to switch fully to ChatGPT, and they don't really care about the quality. But
Right.
the value of actually building and converting, like those websites are not trying to convert anything but clicks on ads. But if
Yes.
you're trying to build a business and convert people and build a relationship and a community, then that's not going to cut it. And you're going to need a human to insert those stories and, as you said, humanize not just the title, but all the content.
Exactly. Yep. 100% agree with that.
So with AI becoming a thing, would you say just using it as a tool and understanding where it can be helpful is the best way they can adapt and stay ahead, or do you have any other tips for that?
Yeah, I think just learning some of the basic ways to use prompts is going to be helpful. If you're a really great writer and you don't feel like you need to use ChatGPT or an AI tool, I think that's fine too. There's definitely two schools of thought, and it can be adapted to who you are and the amount of time that you have in your schedule as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even when you're working with a professional, sometimes it can help you get your ideas across. Like,
Yeah.
I was in a Facebook group where someone was talking about trying to find a good logo for their business, and it was a dog walking company. And they had 4 different logo ideas, which were all very obviously like generic stock pet photo number 4 logo. Like,
Yeah.
and someone in the comments was like, I just plugged information about your business into AI and asked it to make an image for your logo, and here's what it spit out. And it was like a really nice, like, woman walking a dog logo that had a lot of personality and was very recognizable and would stand out from other logos in the area. So like, that doesn't mean that you necessarily even have to use that exact image, but you can then take that back to your designer and be like, this is more like what I'm looking for. Can you give me something more similar to this? And I do that all the time because I work with, artists and designers that are the type of people who can, make something from nothing artistically. Me, I'm like, I can have the idea in my head and it's going to be a stick figure when it gets on the paper. So
Yes.
I've found that the Dolly features of ChatGPT have been really helpful to me in that, where it will get me like far enough for my artist to understand what I want. Certainly not on the same level as what they're going to put out, but better than me giving them a pencil sketch. And that's been a really fun way to use that tool for me.
Oh, that's a great idea. I love that. I think along those lines too, when we're talking about creativity, especially if you have any proprietary information on your website that, again, maybe it's studies or surveys that you've done, you can disallow bots from crawling your website to steal your data to use in ChatGPT. So that's something else to be aware of if you're trying to guard your information, because as of right now, ChatGPT is just gathering information from the web, right? And so none of it is really unique, and we're all just kind of repurposing. So if you don't want your information repurposed and potentially attributed to somebody else, then it's important to alter your robot's text file.
Okay, so that's something that people can probably email you to find out how to do that, I'm guessing.
I can give you the address of a great web developer who knows how to do such things.
Wonderful. So speaking of which, where can people find you? What is the best place to find you online, in your social channels? What's the best way to reach out to you if somebody wants to talk to you?
You can reach us at bigpawsmarketing.com or email us at woof@bigpawsmarketing.com, or myself personally, I'll get either email, but you can also email me at Pamela@bigpawsmarketing.com. We're on all the social channels. I won't say that we're super active because, to be quite honest, we're usually devoting most of our time to helping our clients become super active on all the channels, but we're there too.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have a great offer on the pop-up on the homepage of your website. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, everything that we talked about today and more is available for a free download on bigpawsmarketing.com as a pop-up. Our blogging lead magnet is strategic and profitable blogging for pet businesses. And it's about a 30-page in-depth guide to step-by-step blogging and how you can be strategic and profitable with that. It includes homework sheets and worksheets to help you actually put those tips into practice.
That is awesome. I'm going to go get that myself.
Please
All
do.
right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. For anyone who's listening, you can find all of the details that we talked about and any links that we mentioned in the show notes, which is going to be in the description of whatever you're reading. So if you're on YouTube, you can find it in the description, a link to them in the description there. If you're on whatever podcast channel, you can find a link to the show notes on my website there as well. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Thanks, Skarlet.
What was your favorite thing about this episode? Hit me up on Instagram at Skarlet Rockwood to tell me about it or ask any questions that you have about marketing your own pet business. If you know other pet professionals who would love this podcast, go ahead and screenshot this episode and share it to your Instagram stories. Be sure to tag me when you do, because seeing who's listening and hearing your feedback is 100% what motivates me to keep doing what I do. You can also join the Content Marketing for Pet Professionals Facebook group to connect with other pet industry professionals like you. If you'd like to follow up on any of the resources or links mentioned in this episode, you can find them in the show notes. Don't forget to be awesome, and I'll see you in the next episode.